Good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to our webinar. We will be talking about SAP Central Finance as the foundation for finance transformation. And with me, I have three distinguished guests that have been on a number of different webinars with us, but getting these guys in the same place at the same time is probably as monumental as setting up Sapphire. So Carsten, Tom, and Pete, I want to thank you all for joining us. So welcome. And hopefully, there we go.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, and so let me talk a little bit about some housekeeping items. The webinar, as always, is being recorded, and you can ask questions throughout the webinar. Do it right down here. You'll have this panel down here, and I encourage all of you to ask questions. This is a great panel, probably one of our best panels, and you can ask some great questions. As a reminder, you can download our previous webinars from bramasol.com. Head on up here to the resource section of our page. You can check that out. Reminder for anybody going to Sapphire now, don't miss the presentations by Tom, Carsten, and Pete on their subject matters, but also come by the booth. All three of these gentlemen will be in our booth at various times, and you can check that out on our website. And then go ahead and download all of these different webinars. So go ahead and do that. Today, what we want to do, is the agenda. So welcome and introductions. We kind of did that. I'm going to do a quick overview of something we call Comply, Optimize, Transform, and then we'll dive into the different subject matter areas. Carsten's going to set us up with really an understanding of central finance, core of your finance transformation and what's going on there. Tom will update us on REFX and Central Finance. Pete Graham is going to focus primarily on what's going on in RAR and talk about the roadmap, if you will, and plans for Central Finance, and we'll hear about Pete that. Again, we will have some time at the end for questions and answers, and then we'll wrap up. So let's talk a little bit about the Comply, Optimize, and Transform. Pete, Tom, and I have been presenting over the past few months about your journey in the finance space and the journey in terms of S/4HANA and where you're going. And we talk about it in the terms of this idea of comply, optimize, and transform. And the idea is you set your baseline in the comply, and you move on to how do I transform or optimize my business to improve ROI, position yourself for tomorrow, and then eventually get to this idea of transformation. And that's all about really reinventing your business, driving innovation and agility to survive the future. But how do you define that a little bit more? And what I like to do is define that in terms of the following. So the first one is transactional excellence. Don't think of comply simply as complying with today's standards, whether in the case of leasing, it's ASC 842, or in the case of RAR, 606. In the case of Treasury or others, it might be IFRS 9, CECL, or any of that. This is really about building the foundation of transactional excellence. It's making sure that all of your transactions and all of your data accurately reflect who you are as a business and what you're doing, that the entries are made correctly, that they're calculated correctly with regard to both the standards and ICFR and everything else, and that you can really rely on those transactions to reflect your business the way it is. Step two is then taking that and saying, well, how do I optimize? Where do I go from here? And it's about what we call operational or process excellence. How do I take the information I have today and look at my operations and my processes and begin to maximize the potential or drive improvement in all of those spaces? And finally, in transformation, we take all of those processes and combine them together to create what we call organizational excellence. Understanding how do all of those various pieces, whether in the case of, for example, revenue recognition, taking a look across the entire order to cash process and understanding from a RevRec perspective, how do I gain insights? How do I learn about what's working and not working in my order to cash process? In the case of leasing as an example, where it's the procure to pay process. CLM and leasing are not simply about um, optimization or adherence. They're really about giving you insights and tools to better manage whether it's your source to pay or procure to pay process. And finally, combining those together. If you think of revenue recognition, there's great opportunities for a forecasting or predictive accounting, right? If you can understand how your POBs and how your multi-element arrangements interrelate amongst each other and look at the information you have provided by RAR, you can begin to drive predictive accounting and do what-if scenarios. The same is true in the leasing space or in CLM and REFX. How do you drive? And we're going to hear from both Tom and Pete and others, the guys about more of that. But think about how they interact. Think about the fact that your leased assets are assets on your books, and how does that affect your debt and capital structures? What does that mean as you begin to predict forward the integration of both RAR and revenue accounting to leasing? Because revenue accounting represents, for example, cash in to a certain extent, right? Predicting your cash in. Leasing to a certain extent, and real estate is one of your biggest expenses. It represents cash out. So now you're beginning to affect your cash position and understanding how these tools interrelate. And that's what we mean by organizational excellence. How do you take these tools and begin from a finance perspective to do that? And I have a few slides in here. I won't go into too much depth on them. But again, it's about comply, setting the foundation, looking at things like, what did I do to achieve GAAP? How do I do automation where convenient, but it's not a priority focus? There's some limited integration and you might have a lot of manual intervention. In the case of optimize, you're looking at your existing processes and technologies and seeking to improve them using lessons learned, right? So you've learned things from your implementation. How does my order to cash process work? Am I doing the right things in my sales process? What have I learned from that? I'm beginning to look at some of the manual interventions, whether it's in certain areas of leasing where I had lease types that I needed to manage manually outside the process, and now I want to bring those in. In the case of RAR, I might have some specific cases in the past where in previous versions I couldn't do drop ship. Well, now the new SP7 and SP8 all have drop ship. Now, how do I take that manual process and bring it in and work around it and work through it? Increasing automation. An example of that is using tools like BRF Plus. BRF Plus is really similar to robotic process automation. It's a tool that allows you to make certain decisions in an automated way. And how do I work with that? Looking at your data retrospectively and improve and optimize process. And finally, linking RAR CLM to benchmark and improve your processes, right? Looking at your balance of leased versus owned assets, looking at my bank relationships and where all of my leased and owned assets are from a banking relationships and really beginning to drive that. And finally, transformation is all about beginning with the end in mind. Where do you want to be? What are your organizational needs? Where do you want to go? Taking and using, as Thach Brown would say, compliance lens and turning compliance into a competitive advantage. Treating data, which is all part of the first step, and treating that data as a corporate asset for competitive advantage. How do I use that data, the tremendous amounts of data generated by Central Finance and by S4HANA in the RAR and CLM space? Beginning to leverage predictive accounting and analytics and tools and some of the really cool stuff that Tom's going to kind of talk us through a few of the real estate in the cloud, for example. Doing simulations, and finally taking much more advantage of things like machine learning, RPA, and AI to shift your resources away from repetitive, low-value tasks to active learning and the application of these insights and doing insight to action. So I wanted to frame a little bit of that comply, optimize, transform, because I think it helps people understand what is the big deal? And we'll move in a moment into the intelligent enterprise, and we'll ask Carsten to talk a bit about central finance. And Bramasol's belief is that the heart of the intelligent enterprise, of course, is the digital core and SAP's intelligent applications. But really, the core of your transformation and the core of your business is all about finance. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn this over to Carsten. So welcome and thank you for joining.
Thank you very much for having me today. In S4, we have a lot of cool enterprise, intelligent enterprise capabilities like predictive and simulation, forward-looking features in finance, the ability to roll up and process lots of data with lots of dimensionality without any lag time. And if it comes down to deploying or adopt these features or adopting these features for an organization, there's basically two ways to do this. In the graphic in front of you, you see a central finance graphic. On the left side, those gray boxes are basically the source systems that you have. The path for them to S4 is basically a migration, which could be either a brownfield to brownfield migration, or maybe a re-implementation or a migration where you go from brownfield to greenfield S4. Now, if you are an organization that does not want to do this right away, I know by 2025 we have to all go there anyways, or have multi-ERP system landscapes, then a way to get these new S4 capabilities into your landscape is instead establishing a green box like you see here, a central standard S4 finance system we call Central Finance. So we're using basically a standard S4 system as a central system for finance. The green incoming arrow means we take all these finance transactions that get created, continue to get created in these source systems, SAP or non-SAP or future M&A systems, and bring those transactions into that one central system. That's one central S4 system. So what that allows us basically is to say for finance, now you have all of these S4 capabilities, these intelligent enterprise capabilities that I mentioned already. But also what's different in S4 compared to R3 is that now reporting and transaction execution and planning and consolidation and shared services are in the same single box. You have complete drill back and drill down to these source systems and audit trail to always know what transactions came from where and why. The rollout of central finance can be iterative based on customer priorities. That's important. It's not a big bang, 9 to 18 months large project team approach. Delivery can be milestone based in quarters. We see customers adopting the initial wave of central finance in at least as little as 3 to 6 months, and then we have quarterly rollout milestones subsequently. And as I said, it's most likely then a greenfield approach. So you set up finance the way you want it to be, not the way it was done in the old systems. The important part here is entirely non-disruptive. It's a secondary system in that sense. So we don't have to do any changes to these source systems, which is part of why we can, the initial wave, deliver in 3 to 6 months, right?
Yeah, and one thing I love about the central finance that you talk about, Carsten, is that whole drill back, drill down. I know when we do leasing and we talk about the leasing disclosures or REFX disclosures, people love the idea that I can view all of my information and then with a click go down and not just get to more information, but I can go to the source of that information. So I just love that piece.
Yeah, and again, I mean, with the central finance, we have now an S4 system in the landscape, non-disruptive. It has these intelligent enterprise capabilities, but it also is a central system. And we're talking about revenue accounting today and lease accounting today, and that's why this is really important. Not only because it has the latest technology, and there's aspects of the of S4 being a prerequisite for those two solutions, but also the one central system. Now, having said that, most of our customers in this case are looking to basically deploy central reporting, either for the entity reporting or for the group reporting, as well as central process execution. And then you always come up with the initial candidates like maybe planning, group reporting, legal accounting, local accounting, entity reporting, these kind of things. However, though, customers are branching out once this platform, let's call it this way, platform finance is established, and branch out and look at what else can I do with it. And that's exactly why we're talking today about lease accounting and revenue accounting.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah, build that slide up, please. And so basically the central finance platform that just talked about, you can group it any way you want to, but here in that sense is a planning and reporting and compliance grouping. Again, you pick which processes you want to deploy and when and if, right? In the middle, we have the finance operations. Here, I think it's really about gaining from a business case ROI perspective on doing something centrally, doing it only once, everything around payments. And then the consequence, because you have all these payments in one system, now you have access to cash and liquidity forecasting, eventually even expanding to treasury and also a build out use case. And on the right side, central closing activities, the orchestration of the closing with the closing cockpit, standard forward consolidation, but also now we're getting to IFRS reporting where we can say, hey, once I have this central finance platform in place, can I do revenue accounting? Can I do lease accounting? Really important here is when we talk to customers with multi-ERP system landscapes, and we think around 70% of our SAP customers have that in place to some degree, then 95% of these customers have SAP and non-SAP. So Central Finance really only works or becomes even more valuable if you can connect to non-SAP source systems. We're using a partner called Magnitude. They have a complete suite of capabilities allows us to basically bring the real-time transactions also in from non-SAP source systems. And as I said, since 95% of our multi-ERP backend customers have non-SAP, that's really key for us, but also I think key for then leveraging these central capabilities potentially like revenue accounting and lease accounting.
Carsten, do you find, I know we've talked about this many times and this is a great feature, but we've also talked to customers, and maybe you can talk a little bit about how this, for companies that are consistently growing all the time or doing mergers, acquisitions, consolidations, divestitures, this really seems like a great platform for that.
It's perfect. And I mean, if you look at it, the customers have normally or typically multi-ERP system landscapes because there was a merger acquisition in the past. It just never got completed from a system perspective. So now basically companies can do catch up. And in the same sense, we have the first couple of customers already that basically put Central Finance in and now acquired a new entity. And for them, there's not much the big difference between an entity they already had on a different system or a new system that comes in because of a new acquisition. Absolutely, yeah. You kind of plug it in. We always say there's a playbook and a platform aspect. The platform is already in place. All you have to do is map the data in. And the playbook, I mean, if you save the project plan of how to get one of your several systems in, then you can take that as a copy, as a blueprint for the new acquisition. It should be much more easier to absorb financial information from new acquisitions.
Yep, it gives you an easy way to integrate that unit from a reporting perspective, but take the time to evaluate and integrate other systems as required over time. So absolutely.
Exactly, yeah. So from a deployment perspective, from a business value perspective, you use Central Finance. Obviously, there's an aspect of standardization, unified reporting, unified data measures, transparency and quality. We go down to the lowest level to all the dimensions, hopefully as close as possible down to what was captured at the source transaction level. And what we do, reporting of processes are the same way, the single way, a consistent way. We get centralization, process once, like let's say an allocation run or a depreciation run or things like these, right? And we cover everyone rather than doing it in every single system separately, which could lead to consolidation from a process as well as a system perspective, and also a simplification, right? The less processes, different variants of a process, the less different systems we have, the easier the system landscape and the working with the system gets. And eventually, if you want to, leads to shared services in that sense, or on the right side to automation, right? We have the cash application. We have now more robotics process automation available. And that's all the benefit you gain with a central system, a central finance system.
Right, can you talk for a moment, so this makes it sound super easy. Oh, I just plug it in. Talk for a minute, Carsten, about some of the experience around data, though, because this certainly says it's, you have to pay attention to the data management, what we like to call together with our partners, data mastery. Can you talk about the importance of that for a second?
Yeah, so I think, there is no black and white scenario in that sense when it comes to master. Master data today or the initial data load is on the critical path. It's the most critical activity. Now, you could say, I'm not going to change anything because the way I report today is fine. The SEC hasn't shut me down. I incent my people based on it. They're all happy. And that's what I use to internally manage my organization. Of course, we all recognize we would like to do things better. And so I think that's where data harmonization, data quality improvement comes in. However, really important, you don't have to have 100% data quality project done before you start central finance. You have to be really pragmatic. You know which candidates you want to change them, but you don't have to change everything. Also, and that is really new with central finance in that sense, you don't have to change 100% of the data. If you say, for example, I want to have more detailed data in division A because they're really hurting, and I need to understand my profitability better on a micro segment level, then that's what you do. You don't have to do it for all entities. That's different to typical data migration where if you do it for everyone, right? So you can do much more over time. You will also learn a lot over time. And I think that's really key, right? Today we have the assumption that if we do data quality, we do it once, we're done. With central finance, you will have an S4 system that gives you insight into the system and findings and learnings that will lead you to even further work with certain master data aspects. So you have to be pragmatic. Data quality harmonization should never hold up a central finance project. However, it's a good way to get started and at least do the most important aspects of it.
No, but it's a good idea since you're moving to standardization, right? So it's an opportunity for you to look at all of that data. And if you ever want to get to the automation zero touch, if you haven't done all of the homework on the data, all you're going to do is automate garbage, right? So
yeah,
be careful of that. Do you also find, Carsten, real quick, what we've talked to customers about is there's also a mind shift here, and you talked about standardization, and I want to harp on that or focus on that for a second. How are companies making the leap from thinking of SAP as fit for purpose? I can go out and configure and customize SAP all I want, to this concept of fit to standard. And you're using standard processes and standard definitions so that you can enable all of this. Can you talk for a second about that?
Yeah, I think people are more and more stuck with either processes or answers where the lack of standardization is in the way, right? They can't get an answer. It takes too long. It's too much work. And I think there's a thirst for simplicity, and simplicity comes through standardization. There's only one way of doing it, and it's the easy way most likely, and then it's all better because you get your answers quicker. You can get better insight quicker. You don't have to reconcile less data. So I think from a process perspective and a system perspective and a configuration perspective, there's a real thirst for, oh, let's get rid of all of this complexity. Now, to do this in your existing system or several systems, most likely even in different kinds of systems, is really hard. And so for most of our customers, that's a big part of business transformation. The central finance can enable this kind of transformation, this business transformation, this finance transformation, by basically applying these new, simpler, standardized ways into that new box without having to change the old world. So that's kind of now the thirst is there, the desire is there, and here's a way actually that's non-disruptive and lets me adopt it over time and quickly.
Yeah, right, and it requires a lot of change management, but we can talk about that some other time. Yep.
All right.
All right.
Now, I'm going to hand it over to Tom in a second, but in the example of contract and lease management, for example, central finance can be brought into your landscape now. It is not disruptive. Within 3 to 6 months, you can have your first process up and running. And once you have central finance up and running, it is a standard S4 system. So here's an example how standard SAP functionality actually requiring S4, right, or latest ECC release, but in this case S4 can be used then. The central finance system can be used as the platform, as the host for additional capabilities, in this case, contract and lease management, right? Where we say, for example, real estate management is and can run on S4. The asset accounting required to do it is and can run on S4, which is provided by central finance. Now, of course, if you have your central finance up and running and you use the accounting for it, right, then you can use the accounting for financial reporting. but you can also bring the data back to your source systems as indicated in this graphic here. Really important is to this point today, you can make contract and lease management work in a central finance based S4 system. It is a project implementation task. There's some dotted lines here where you have to determine how you want to have that built out and get it done. But it's an example of where we can use that platform that central finance puts in and use it for additional finance scenarios. If you want to maybe go quickly to the next slide, which is just a variation of it. The variation being that basically in the first scenario, we just report out of what we had. In the second scenario, we post back to the source systems and bring the source postings back into a real account. So again, here's a variation. It's part of your project implementation anyways. And with that, I'll thank you. Hopefully you either have a unique S4 system in your landscape, or maybe we'll have a central finance system soon. Over to you, Tom.
Well, welcome, Tom. Thank you very much. Thank you, Carsten. That was really great. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Tom, or a friend colleague in the leasing world. One of the things that we did recently, Tom, as you know, you may have seen on our recent webinars, is it's the look of simplification. And what I love about both RAR and CLM is the fact that it simplifies your life from a leasing and real estate management perspective. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, John. Appreciate that. I've been asked to talk a little bit about lease accounting and day 2 and how you can use contract and lease management to support your processes going forward, as well as updates in the solution. Now, as Carsten said, this solution is available on your central finance platform, as well as an ECC today, or your own S4 system. So it can be deployed in a variety of different ways, and it's designed to support the new lease accounting standards, IFRS 16, ASC 842. And then those in the public sector are coming along, the GASB 87. So when we think about complying with these new lease accounting standards, a large number of companies have really taken this minimalistic approach of, you know what, I just need to get this thing done, comply, and then I can look at an operational system going forward. And they rely on one of our favorite tools to do it, Excel, right? The spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet's a fantastic tool for what it's designed to do, right? To calculate things and to quickly on the fly perform and create models. The concept of a spreadsheet isn't new, however. It's been around for quite a while, and while I was doing some research, I came across an example. We'll call it a spreadsheet, if you will, because it has columns in rows from the Babylonians. And what's awesome about this is the Babylonians used this clay tablet to perform what we call Pythagorean triples, to prove the calculation of A and B and C satisfying A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And the person who created this tablet was running through the calculations, and because we all don't speak Babylonian here, you'll take my word for it, but they were taking the final row in the last column and copying it to the beginning column of the next row. And when they were creating this tablet, they made a mistake in copying the ending value to the new beginning value, and it threw all of their calculations off going forward. And this tablet was used in the education of other mathematicians in Babylon. So the concept of cut and paste errors is nothing new. And we see that with a spreadsheet research done by Ventana Research found that even today, 35% of respondents had data errors in their spreadsheets, 26% had formula errors, and 19% had format errors. So there's a large number of errors that occur when you rely on spreadsheets, and it becomes even worse the more complicated the spreadsheet. Now, I haven't had anybody ever tell me that the new lease accounting standards were simpler than they were expecting. So I think this is an area where if you're using spreadsheets to help you comply today, you'll want to look at something more robust and standardized for the future to help you optimize and transform these processes going forward. Next slide. To add even more complexity to this whole story is that leasing is not a one and done process, right? So you may have used a spreadsheet or a point solution to comply for your day one, right? It calculated your valuation amounts. You were able to create a right of use asset and a liability. You calculated your depreciation and your interest and reduction of the liability, and even created some disclosure reports. That's fantastic. But what happens in day two? Because leasing is a process that is always being modified and things are always occurring in that lease. It has a life cycle of its own. So things like modifications occur, and these modifications impact all of your calculations. So maybe you terminate a lease early and you don't update the system, and now you have an evergreen situation in which you're paying for land or property or even cars that no longer are using, or you have a CPI adjustment or currency valuations, right? All of these things are occurring periodically, and they require constant vigilance to ensure that your system is updated and the postings are accurate and correct. Next slide. So we worked with our accounting partners to come up with a solution, and what's most important here is that we take standardized leasing information that is found within contract and lease management, in which you can abstract your lease agreement, enter the terms and conditions there, and use those terms and conditions to generate the payments, but also leverage that same information to determine the proper classification of the lease, to accurately evaluate the lease, and then generate those postings in real time to your SAP finance system. Whether you're using account-based approach or multi-ledger approach, all of those entries are made in real time and without the use of interfaces. So, okay, next slide. So what we did is we took our standard real estate contract, or the contract found within contract and lease management, which has your multiple lease in and lease out types, and extended it so it now has your classification and valuation rules. And it calculates all of your present value, depreciation, repayment, interest rate, and it supports your modifications and reassessments. So you're able to quickly and easily, once you make an update, asset accounting will be updated in real time. The balance sheet will be updated in real time, et cetera. Because there are these, no, you're good, John. You can just keep it there.
Oh, I was good. Okay.
Yeah, you're fine. I gotta hurry anyways. So you gotta take these events and be able to evaluate them and update all the calculations. And because these events have such an impact, right, it'll update the postings in your valuation postings for you. So leasing is not a one and done. And that's why a tool like a spreadsheet or any kind of point solution is not going to work for you in the long run. And you need a tool like contract and lease management that's integrated with SAP Finance to support these processes going forward. All right, let's go to the next slide. Oh, that didn't come across very well. So what we did is essentially the solution was released, and after we had released the solution, our board came to us and said, you know, we have customers who are using the solution to manage equipment, to manage real estate, to manage all kinds of asset classes. And we really want to make sure that we feel comfortable saying that the solution supports all kinds of asset classes. So engage an auditor to ensure that the solution is correct and that it's certified. So we engaged PwC and we asked them to take the illustrative examples found as part of IFRS 16 and ASC 842 and use our favorite accounting tool, Excel, and manually calculate the expected results. And they did that and then created those same leases within contract and lease management and compared the results. In every case, the results were exactly the same. Day one, perfect, right? Not so bad. I mean, most applications can do that. But then they said, okay, now let's go through a modification process. Let's reduce the number of printers on this contract, the number of cars, rail cars, the square footage of a lease, run it through the modification process and see if it calculates and updates correctly. And it did in every case. And therefore, we had received a certification from PwC that it handled these processes accurately. Okay, let's go to the next slide. As we think about transformation, we also need to be able to now incorporate improved analytics, and we're excited because of BW4 and SAP Analytics Cloud that we're able to, in real time, take data and present it using the newest graphical and newest tools for you, and even deliver content for you. So here's an example of looking at your leasing portfolio and understanding the leasing portfolio by country. Or the next slide. To be able to look at my critical dates of this portfolio and understanding what leases are going to need to be reviewed, and when will the renewal processes need to be executed for each lease agreement. Next slide. Or my valuations, what's the status of my valuations by lease type, and what are the values associated with them by country. Okay, next slide. So I'm often asked where we're at with the development and updates, and this is public information, but we've released some OSS notes for 2018 to handle things like foreign currency valuations, lease impairments, reclassification of foreign currencies and long-term liabilities, as well as a balance report that allows you to choose by balance and classifies and organizes all those leases, groups them together, so I can see by valuation rule, all the leases, all the values to help you comply with the standards. For planned innovations, the only thing I really want to just go over are two things. One, the lease questionnaire, which is scheduled for the first half of 2019. I'm doing the final testing now, so we expect that to be released very soon. And it'll allow customers to enter their own questionnaire questions for evaluating and classifying a lease, documenting all the answers related to those questions, and then creating an evaluation rule for it. And then the other big thing is the weighted average interest rate and term reports. We also expect those to still be delivered by the end of first half 2019. Those are the updates and the information I think I wanted to share around contract and lease management. John,
yeah, when we get into when you guys go online, we'll have these cleaned up a little bit. So
okay.
Thank you, Tom. And I think this is great, and you kind of hinted at the whole idea of the comply, optimize, transform. So look for Tom's talks at Sapphire. I think, Tom.
Absolutely, please come by. I have a number of them, and I'd love to get your input.
Yep, and you can come to our website. We'll be posting a lot of that information on all three of these guys' talks at Sapphire. So Pete, good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, good afternoon.
So
hear me, John?
I can, and we always talk to you, and thank you for just being a great supporter. Let's pass this over to you so you can present. There we go.
All right, let me know if it comes through.
There we go.
It's coming through?
Yes, it is.
All right, John, thanks. And thanks for Carsten and Tom for setting up the agenda with the topic so well. We now want to talk a little bit about the RevRec solution, or RAR, and how it fits into the central finance area. Before I make some comments on that, I just want to give people a quick update on RAR. It's basically a solution that automates and simplifies revenue accounting. It's actually part of maintenance, right? So it ships with ERP. S/4HANA Finance is now part of the core with 1809, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And really, the idea is revenue documents go into RAR, you use some rules, some events, and out come the journal entries that represent revenue recognition. RAR is a solution, but it has three parts. It has an integration layer, a rules engine, and trial posting area. This is where it gets a lot of its flexibility, as well as can tap into a lot of different data, whether it's from SAP or non-SAP. And we have customers even using it in a kind of bulk loading process from a data mart or some kind of data hub. As of April, we just pulled these stats last week. I mean, we have well over 240 active projects. About 70 of those are live customers. We have a lot of SAP divisions and corporate-wide using it as well. And so we've had a good journey with RAR, and it's now going on over 5 years that it's in market, and now it's officially GA as of 1809, and so that's a good thing in terms of being able to get access to RAR. And so the planned innovations on the on-premise side continue. There's actually more cloud coming that will have an update at Sapphire. But really the one key thing I want to make sure you understand is that with 1809, we do have a feature parity with RAR 1.3 Feature Pack 7, but starting with RAR Feature Pack, or really Support Pack 8, those are really going to be kind of mainly bug fixes. There'll be a little bit of enhancements here and there, but really that's where we're going to kind of have a little bit of a separation between more investment on the S/4HANA platform, and our big release for S/4HANA now is scheduled for 1909 compared to the ERP. There's also a way to migrate actually from ERP to S4. So don't be concerned. There is a way to migrate, and we can talk about that offline. With respect to the topic kind of the day around central finance, for RAR, you're pretty much still looking at a sidecar, right? So you'd have to implement RAR on another instance, whether it's S4 or ERP, and then look to use the integration layer, the adapter reuse layer, as we call it, to potentially move data over or to the central finance instance. And this is really where, as customers, you'll probably have to do a pilot or some kind of proof of concept to validate this. This is a topic that we're actively investigating, but unfortunately at this time, I don't have any results that I can share with you. But certainly we have, as Carsten will tell you, we have many customers that come up to us and ask us about central finance and RAR, so we continue to investigate it. And we hope that later in the summer or I would think no later than the fall, we'd be able to give you an update on some of the insights as we've been doing further investigations on this topic. So the big news with RAR is it's now officially GA. You can get it on ERP or S/4HANA. With S/4HANA, it's now part of the core, and please keep that in mind in the future, right? Eventually, you're going to want to get on the S/4HANA code line if you're going to want to see a lot of the enhancements that we will continue to deliver over the next couple of years. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to John so we can wrap up the webinar.
Thank you, Pete. As always, very informative. If there are any questions while we're out there, we'll give folks a chance. I'd like to do a couple of quick polls, if folks don't mind, while you look at checking us out on Sapphire. As I said, we will be doing a number of different items, so bear with me a second. So we will be doing a number of different presentations here, so check us out. Pete, Tom, and the rest of the team will be joining us. So a quick poll, just if folks don't mind, we're going to launch that poll. Have you started an S4 program? Haven't started assessing the program, so if you all could take a few seconds to vote, that would be awesome. Meanwhile, we have a quick question. Yeah, some technical questions Pete will follow up on for RAR. about contract combinations and things. So we'll give a few more. About only a third of you have voted, so if you guys want to pop in there real quick. All right. So we'll close that one out. Thank you, everybody. About 21% of you haven't started, 37% are assessing, only 11% completed, so that's really interesting. So for those of you who are just beginning, hopefully this was very insightful. I think Central Finance is a great way for you to get started. Another quick poll for you, if you don't mind, is what are your biggest concerns in launching a finance transformation or S/4HANA project? Is it cost, proving out ROI, change management, data, complexity? So go ahead and answer that quick question and then we'll wrap up. All right. A lot of change here. Most people, we don't want to spoil the results. And you have multiple, you can do multiple answers here. So go ahead and click multiple concerns there. All right, so we'll close that out. 53% of you saw cost as being an issue. 41% saw data as an issue. 47% saw complexity. So, about 50% of people see data, complexity, and cost as being a challenge. Again, Central Finance is a way for you to help manage some of those costs and challenges. But don't underestimate, I would say, some change management. A lot of what we see, only 24% of folks looking at change management as an issue. I would encourage everybody to think about that, primarily because what we see in the user adoption space is, oh yeah, we love Fiori tiles and we love all of this, but I still want to do SAP GUI. So, change management, of course, is a big issue there. So one more quick question. In the case of Central Finance, what integration with asset management? Yeah, we'll go ahead and take care of that. We'll follow up with everybody. So why don't we do this? We'll start wrapping up. So I want to again thank Pete and Tom and Carsten for participating and for all of you for hanging in there on this webinar. Check us out at bramasol.com and Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. We'll be at Sapphire, so we look forward to seeing all of you there. And this webinar will be posted in the next couple of days after I clean up a couple of those slides, and we'll have that up. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate all of your time. Again, Tom and Pete, thank you as always for your support, and I hope everybody has a great day.